Concept cracking it's based around the idea that pupils today don't really have theological concepts. They don't use them in the same way that they would have done, say, 50, 60 years ago. So they don't know how to access the world of a religious believer.
There's a specific way of planning a concept cracking lesson. So you'd start the lesson off by, for example, maybe you'd introduce the concept and maybe see what the students already understand by that concept, and then you'd move on to explain what that concept means, and to then look at ways in which they could relate that to their life, that they can understand it in a deeper way.
Concept cracking is a way for a teacher to unpack a belief when they're approaching religious education, particularly Bible stories. So step one, the teacher unpacks the beliefs and works out what the meaning is behind the story. Step two, the teacher decides which central meaning he or she wants to explore. The second part of step two is to write the learning outcomes, usually using Attainment Target 1 and Attainment Target 2 in order to have learning about and learning from in the lesson. Step three is to try to say, where can I start in terms of the children's experience? So where does the child come into this story in terms of their experience? Also in step three is the major part of the lesson with all the activity. That's the artwork, the dance, the music, whatever it is you're doing to explore the story. And then step four is reflecting on the main theological idea and opening the story up to say to the children, what does it mean? What do you think about it? Why is the story in the Bible?
Who gave it a low rating for Breaks the Laws of Nature then? One of the things about concept cracking is it allows you to start with learning objectives first. One of my big issues when I was a PGCE student was I'd spend hours planning things. I'd just be making lesson plans and it would take me 3-4 hours, and I was thinking, well, there's got to be an easier way to do this. And I would always start with an activity. I'd say, well, let's get an activity down. What kinds of activity can I do? Why was it responsible in that video of that lady in the pushchair in the pram? If that was a miracle, why would that be responsible? People had said to me, well, why don't you start with the learning objectives? And I never really thought about what it means to start with the learning objectives. And that's where concept cracking really comes in. It says, well, the first stage of concept cracking is unpacking the concepts revolving around whatever it is that you're trying to teach. So why are we looking at miracles then? Well, miracles are very important for what Jesus did. I've taught lessons on miracles in the past, and when I first started teaching lessons on miracles, one of the things that I found is they don't happen. Explaining a miracle. But before we look at the miracles of Jesus, I really want to sort of just get you thinking about the idea of a miracle. I didn't really want to just start off with Jesus and say, okay, these are Jesus' miracles, are they real, are they not real? One of the things that concept cracking asks you to do is once you've identified the concepts that you want to get across, you have to think of a way of engaging it in their life. What happened if you had fallen off that cliff 3 minutes earlier? One of the ideas I had is looking at examples that happen today. You can't question that they happen, and that hopefully will make it more relevant to them. Before we even look at Jesus' miracles, I'm going to show you a video. Can you write boy and the car? We might need to watch this twice, because when I first watched it, I didn't catch what happened.
Watch this. A 4-year-old boy knocked down by an out-of-control car. He gets up and walks away.
Looking at the boy that got hit by a car, they're not going to say, well, did that actually happen? They're going to say, yes, that did happen, but actually what I want to learn from that is, well, did it fit with the definition of a miracle? Is that something that breaks the laws of nature? Is it difficult to explain? Does it come from God?
If I had a tip to give with concept cracking, when you're actually using it, don't try and cover too many concepts, because the mistake I made when I first started to use it was I thought, oh great, I can do Emmanuel, I can do Saviour, I can do 3 or 4 different concepts within one lesson. And actually, when I'd done that, I realised that really wasn't quite right. What I should have done was taken just one concept and just looked at that one concept for the whole hour, because that whole idea behind concept cracking is that you get deep. rather than treating it at a superficial level. So just deal with one concept at a time.
As children discuss theologically, there's also running alongside in RE an understanding of literacy and the language that needs to be taught. So as appropriate and at the right time, language that the children have not met before will be introduced. So there are concepts such as salvation, which probably will, about the age of 12 or 11, could be younger. Those kind of concepts will be introduced because they're the language of RE and theology as well. But you don't start with that language, you start with the children's experience.
So a successful lesson for me is about whether or not the pupils go away from that, continuing to talk about those concepts, and they're able to understand actually what it is for someone in faith to believe that.
Concept cracking has caught my imagination because I think it helps to give better RE in terms of Bible teaching. So if I'm going to teach a parable, I need to think very hard about why I'm teaching it and also what I want the children to reflect on at the end. So for instance, if you're teaching the lost sheep, it's not just a story about a sheep being lost. And if you think about it first, or if you explore the unpacking the belief first and concepts, you'll understand it's actually about God. And it's about a risk-taking God, and that's the centrality of the story. Let's take the example of Noah. People have taken the story of Noah and taught it as a story about animals and about water, and that's it. But if you're actually going to explore what Noah is about before you begin, you're going to say, this is a story about promise, about covenant.
The third stage of concept cracking is engaging pupils with the concepts and thinking about how it fits into your world experience. So you think about that. So when I was looking at omniscience, for example, the idea of all-knowing and that God is all-knowing, I didn't want pupils to just say, oh, he's all-knowing, and write that down, and then that's success for them. For me, I really wanted them to get an understanding of what it feels like to know that something is all-knowing, know that something is watching over you. So I created a starter activity where I would connect a camera up to a whiteboard and switch the camera on, and it would record everything that the pupils are saying and doing, and I had that rolling. And I said the head's pretty annoyed with all the behaviour, so he sets CCTV up in every single lesson. And then at the end of it, I said, look, I'm only joking. There's no CCTV. They're not going to be filming you. But the reason why we did that is because Christians believe that God is all-knowing. It's not enough to know that all-knowing, but it's actually a feeling, a sense that God knows your every single thought and feeling. How is that similar to CCTV? And then we would then be able to, once we've done the CCTV activity, we'd then be able to look at some sort of original religious source, which I think's really important.
You need to understand where your students are coming from. You need to know your students quite well, because you need to pick examples to relate it to their lives. Now, that's going to vary depending on which age group you're teaching, which year you happen to be teaching in, because you're going to have different films coming out, different pop songs, all that sort of thing. It's going to vary depending on which area of the country you live in, but you do need to know your students well enough to be able to pick examples that they will be able to relate to their own lives in a direct way, for concept cracking to really be able to have its full effect.